Hey friends, it's Melissa. Welcome back or welcome to Honeybee's Hangout and welcome to my first ever Top 5 Friday video. This is something I talked about in my last video that went up on Tuesday that I wanted to start doing, was making these top 5 lists on Fridays. So I'm really excited to finally get into one. Just a little like backstory. I love to make lists, like practical lists, like grocery lists or chore lists, but also like lists of movies, music, TV, books, snack foods, or like favorite foods, vacation destinations, anything you could think of. If I can figure out a way to make a top 5 list out of it, okay, sometimes I cheat and it's like a top 7 list, but I will find a way to do it. The furthest I ever went with it was when I was 16. I was in my second year of high school. We had a terrible winter. We had multiple snowstorms, like blizzards, ice storms. And the school that I went to, it was located in one state. We had students from that state and 2 other states. It was closed a lot. Like we were getting like full weeks off of school. So I decided that the best way to use my free time was to get a notebook and to make a list of every movie I had seen in my life up to that point. The first one I think was Annie when I was like 4 years old. My Uncle Frank took me to see Annie in the theater and I fell asleep all the way up to like whatever I had seen when I was 16. Obviously, I bit off a little more than I could chew with that one. There was no way I was going to remember all of those movies from 12 years of life. And I wound up giving up like when I had to go back to school, and when I got frustrated. But it was a fun thing to attempt. And it's funny that I came up with that as an example because one of the other things I did during that same period of time is actually gonna lead me to the topic of this week's list, which is that I had a friend from school come home with me on a Friday afternoon to spend the weekend. We had a blizzard and an ice storm, and she wound up stuck at my house for like a week and a half. And during the time she was there, because this is something that we bonded over so much, we watched all of my old New Kids on the Block videos from when I was like 10, 11, 12 years old, over and over again. We watched them. We would go to the corner store and get like cans of soda and candy bars, and we would just watch the same videos over and over again, and talk about how much we love the New Kids, which brings me to the topic of this week's list, which is the top 5 boy bands of all time. Right? I love boy bands. I have very strict rules for what I consider a boy band. There are bands that you might put on a list that I wouldn't consider. For example, I think of boy bands as having been sort of assembled in some way for the purpose of being a boy band. Like that's what they were there for. So any band that kind of evolved organically, I don't really always consider like any band, well, I call them like maybe like the brother bands. So like everyone knows I love Hanson. I think they're incredible musicians. Just because they were young when they started doesn't make them a boy band in my eyes. I also don't consider like the Jonas Brothers a boy band. And then even if you're talking about bands that don't play instruments like A band like, because I'm from Philadelphia originally, so a band like Boys to Men. I love them, but they were sort of an R&B group that kind of evolved really naturally. I like they performed at school together, so I don't necessarily know that I believe they're a boy band. Although when New Kids on the Block has a song called "Boys in the Band" that came out a couple of years ago, 2019, and there's a really cool like rap section that Donnie Wahlberg does where he like lists all of these boy bands. I will actually, I'll link the video in the description because it's a really fun video. And he does mention Boys to Men. So I don't know. Maybe if Donnie Wahlberg thinks they're a boy band, and he would know from a boy band, right? Then maybe they are. The other thing is, this is just me. I don't have any like cold hard facts. I have a couple of little tidbits about like how much awards they've won and things like that, but that's not why I picked them. It's more about like maybe the cultural impact as opposed to the the numbers. And it's also about like, did I like them? Like, are they bands that I listen to? If I don't, if I don't listen to them and I don't enjoy them, I could put them on a list of the top 5 things. The other thing is, there is one very glaring example of this, and one, if you are younger, if you are on Twitter or Instagram, there might be a second thing that you're aware of. In that, as we're going through this, we're gonna be talking about bands where there may be a problematic member. Problematic to me, problematic to people watching this. And I had to really consider like, is the fact that one of the members went on to become problematic, does it erase what they did as a band? Does it erase the impact that it had on me or on, you know, pop culture, on the music industry? So just, you know, just be aware that I'm aware that there are some potentially problematic individuals. It's not about them, it's about the band as a whole. Okay, so since I just went through that whole spiel, we'll just jump right in. Ooh, normally these lists are in random order. This one is in chronological order. It just flowed better that way. It made more sense. We'll jump right, and now we will jump right in to the first band on the list, and also the first band with a problematic individual member, and that is the Jackson 5. I went through a lot of soul searching, trying to decide if I could bring myself to be unbiased and put when I by putting them on this list and talking about them, knowing what obviously Michael Jackson would go on to become. But realistically, I think they have to be on the list, because if you don't have the Jackson 5, and their contemporaries would have been the Osmonds, if you don't have those two groups, I don't know that you have modern boy bands. I think they sort of started, that was like the setting of the standard. It was the beginning of kind of making the mold of what a boy band is. You had, sort of from the older and then down to the one that was like a lot younger. Now, of course, in the case of both the Jackson Five and the Osmonds, they were brothers, so they were all related. Now, post them, that is not the case. Some boy bands will have like a set of brothers, or they'll have cousins, but they're not all five related. But if you're younger, and you don't know about the Jackson Five, they were formed in 1965. They were Michael Jackson, of course, and his older brothers, Marlon, Jermaine, Tito, and Jackie. They started off at a label called Steeltown Records, which I had never heard of. But then that was in 1967. And then a year later, they moved to Motown Records. And I'm pretty sure, like everybody on the planet who's into music has heard of Motown Records. And that's where they just exploded. They were the first group to like debut their first 4 singles at number one on the Billboard Hot 100. And the songs that we're talking about within those 4 songs are the songs you think about when you think about the Jackson Five. I mean, you're talking I Want You Back, you're talking ABC, you're talking I'll Be There. So kind of just, right out the gate there, within 3 years of formation, they just exploded. I think I say the Osmonds were their contemporaries because they were around at the same time, but they seem to come up like a little bit behind the Jacksons. So like, I think they definitely were the more influential band. Certainly now, the band with the most staying power. I don't think you hear a lot of songs by the Osmonds on the radio, but you very definitely still hear the Jackson Five. And they kind of influenced, it's every boy band that came after them, right? Like there was no future band that was untouched by the legacy of the Jackson Five. If you look at, for example, the next band on the list, which is my boys, the loves of my life, New Kids on the Block. Yes. You will see they're extremely influenced by the Jackson Five. In fact, when the band was forming, there's a very cool like cause and effect sort of thing, or like a little bridge. I chose New Kids on the Block for the list because they are my boy band. They are the band I grew up with. I've loved them since I was 10 years old. I could spend an entire hour's worth of a video telling you what they've meant in my life. But beyond that, they were sort of like, they were not the first boy band of the what I will say the modern era. You're looking at 80s and 90s boy bands at this point. They were not the first. Coming out of the late 70s, so you're looking at a full 10 years before, you have young Spanish-speaking audiences had Menudo, and then young Black audiences had New Edition. And in New Edition particularly, you see that influence of the Jackson Five, because Maurice Starr, who created and managed and produced New Edition, himself was very influenced by the Jackson Five. He grew up with them. So he set out to create a modern boy band in the image of the Jackson Five. And he, at first, New Edition, which was acts like Bobby Brown, came out of New Edition. And if you were a 90s teen like me, Belle Biv DeVoe came out of New Edition. And they were actually, they were then instrumental in producing and sort of guiding the career of Boyz II Men. So it all kind of goes, there was some sort of falling out between Maurice Starr and New Edition. And he then went on to form New Kids on the Block. And he formed them and said this in many interviews to be a white version of New Edition. He felt, as I just pointed out, that young black girls had New Edition, young Spanish-speaking girls had Menudo, but at that point in time, there wasn't a white boy band, which is actually interesting, because I think a lot of people think that boy bands as a concept, it's a white girl thing. But that's not how it started, really. That's not the history of it. It's just the way it's kind of gone. But so when he formed New Kids on the Block in 1984, they went through a couple of different lineups. It started off being Danny Wood, Jordan Knight, Jonathan Knight, Donnie Wahlberg, and at first his brother, Mark Wahlberg, who many of you who are younger probably don't even know was a rapper, singer, before he was an actor. Certainly you wouldn't know it from him because he doesn't talk about it. I think he's embarrassed about it. And they also had another childhood friend of the Wahlbergs, and his name was Jamie Kelly. And he and Mark Wahlberg both left early on, and Maurice Starr went to look for a younger brother type, to be like the Michael Jackson of the group. And he found Joey McIntyre, who at the time, I believe, was 12 years old. At the time that they sort of made it big, he was 15, 16, and he was always my favorite. Here's a geeky side note. Joey McIntyre's birthday is on New Year's Eve, and when I was in the throes of my New Kids love, I would, every New Year's Eve, sing out loud happy birthday to him, like an absolute dork. There came a time where it started to seem like there was a new boy band every day, right? But for my generation, you're talking from 1988 to 93, 92, 93. New Kids on the Block, they were it. They were it for a number of years. And then they went away for 15 years, 1993 to 2008. 15 very long years, I'll tell you that much. And then shockingly, they got back together in 2008, and it was like the heavens opened up and the sun shined down on me, and I was such a happy camper. I was such a happy girl. I've seen them a bunch of times, with my cousin, with friends. My friend from high school that I watched all of the New Kids videos with during the blizzard, I went to a concert with her and her daughter, which was crazy and surreal. And we went to Wahlburgers beforehand and had delicious cheeseburgers. Um, but yeah, it was an amazing time. And I think they were, they had like such international success that I think they sort of, you got this like a more, okay, a more like well defined mold out of them, right? You got, you had the one band member that was like older, maybe 2 to 3 years older. You had three guys in the middle that were roughly the same age. And then you had one that was probably, so the oldest guy is 18, the youngest guy would be 15. Like, it's like a 3 year gap between the oldest and the youngest. So you have the big brother, you have the baby, and then in the middle, you have the, you have like your, what do you want to call it? Like your crooner, like the one with the amazing voice, right? You have your bad boy, and you have your shy, sensitive one. Sometimes a guy can be more than one of those things, but not normally. Sometimes you can be like the baby and the crooner, but you know, it doesn't usually happen that way. Till we get to the last band on the list, and then all hell breaks loose. So you've set that mold with New Kids. We all grow up, we move on because we have to, because they're not together for 15 years. They come back, obviously, so do we. But in the meantime, what do? You've got a new generation coming up. My nose is really itchy tonight. You've got a new generation coming up, and you need a new boy band. And in the late 90s, boy, did you guys get boy bands. There were so many boy bands in the late 90s. It was crazy. And you have ones that were fairly successful, and then you have ones that were sort of like one hit wonders, like one and done. And then you have the big two, right? The big two contenders and the next two spots on the top 5 list, which is going to be NSYNC and the Backstreet Boys. And you can't talk about one without talking about the other, because they pretty much were late 90s boy bands. Hold on. I'm going to flip this because I did write stuff down, even though I know a ridiculous amount right off the top of my head. Sometimes I know a little too much, and then I start rambling. So, you're looking at two bands that were like right behind each other. Backstreet Boys formed in 1993, and NSYNC formed in 1995. The Backstreet Boys had some success overseas, like in Europe, a little bit earlier on, but their first US album came out in 1997, which is the same year that NSYNC released their first album. So they were kind of neck and neck. I don't know if people remember watching TRL after school. I was like 19 by then. I should have been too old for boy bands, but I'm just not. I just love them. So my brother would come home from high school, and his friends would come over, and we would all watch TRL, and they would have the top 10 countdown, and the first and second spot were just constantly bouncing back and forth between Backstreet Boys and NSYNC. Now, I feel like they say there wasn't a rivalry, and maybe there wasn't, because really, why should there be? There's more than enough. Obviously, there's more than enough fans for everyone. Like, they both sold. So here's some little facts. In Sync, oh, let's have a pop quiz. When In Sync released their debut album, which was self-titled in 1997, they sold 240 million copies of it in 1 week, in the first week that it was out. That record stood for 15 years. And then here's your pop quiz. What artist and what album broke that record? And I will tell you, you can leave your answers in the comments, and don't cheat and Google it. That's no fun. We're playing a fun game here. No cheating. But I will tell you the answer at the beginning of next week's video. So you have a week to put your answer down there. But that's kind of crazy. And you wouldn't see that happen anymore, I don't think. It's just with streaming services and everything. I think it would be that's got to be super rare, right? Hold on one sec. I have tea. My mouth is dry. I'm gonna take a sip of tea. That was warm when I brought it up here. So now the Backstreet Boys, they have a little bit of an interesting history, in that they're still together. And the longest they've ever not been together was a 2-year period, from 2002 to 2004. Other than that, they've consistently released new music, they've consistently toured, and they're the first band since Led Zeppelin to have 10 albums in the top 10 on the Billboard 200. Their first 10 albums, so 10 studio albums, in the top 10 on the Billboard Top 200. And they are also, excuse me, I'm choking. They're also the only boy band, as of now, the only boy band to top the US album charts in 3 different decades. That's kind of cool. In Sync, on the other hand, they sort of fizzled out. They went, I'm sorry, I'm laughing for a reason, and I'll tell you why in a second. They went on a brief hiatus, or what was supposed to be a brief hiatus, in 2002. They apparently, the story is that they got together at one point to discuss what the future of the band would be, and Justin Timberlake was like, yeah, no, like, I want to make my own music. I feel like I'm more serious about the music than other people. So that was pretty much it. They were done for after that. Now, at the time, if you had asked me, I might have told you that I preferred In Sync to the Backstreet Boys. I think at the time they were the edgier boy band, and I found myself listening to them a lot more at that time. Over the years, I've come to the conclusion that Backstreet Boys music ages better. I don't want to say anything insulting, because I have members of my own family that will defend In Sync with their dying breath, and I am not going to offend them because I have to socialize with them, and be friends with them. But I think the BSB songs age better. I think they're more timeless in terms of the melodies, the harmonies. Maybe they're a little more fun to sing. I mean, I want it that way. It's not like lyrically genius, right? But everybody loves it. It's a huge pop culture reference. They're standing the test of time. Part of that could be because they're still together and they never had a huge gap. I don't know. I guess we'll have to see. I just don't, I don't see NSYNC like standing the test of time in the same way. I don't hear their songs on the radio, or like I don't get them recommended to me on Spotify, even though I have an I Love a Boy Band playlist. So you have to. That's a debate. That is open for debate, and you will have to tell me in the comments if you're like a 90s kid, late 90s kid and or teen, and you were into the Backstreet Boys NSYNC. You'll have to tell me how you feel about that, because I would be interested to know other people's perspectives. But mine is definitely feeling like Backstreet Boys is standing the test of time a little better. And finally, one more band. And aside from New Kids on the Block, because they're mine, this is the band I'm actually most excited to talk about, because I feel like I find them absolutely fascinating. And if you're looking at sort of the current musical landscape, I kind of think they're the, like, over the, let's say like from the time that Backstreet Boys and NSYNC fans started to grow up, going into like the early or like the mid 2010s, what do you call them, the aughts. So say for the last 15 years, I think they're the only band that makes any sense to put on this list. I think they're the only band that's made any sort of impact in the last 15 years. Okay, hold on. So, if you don't know, the band that I'm talking about is One Direction. The only other band I could see someone saying to me, like making an argument that they impacted music, maybe because they brought K-pop to be more mainstream, you could look at a band like BTS. Maybe. My whole thing with One Direction, though, they're going to stand the test of time. As a lifelong scholar of boy bands, this band intrigues the hell out of me, because remember when I was talking earlier about the mold that started with the Jackson 5 and the Osmonds, and then you moved on to Menudo and New Edition, and then you kind of like solidified that mold with New Kids on the Block. And then 10 years later, when you're looking at bands like Backstreet Boys and NSYNC, you can see how each band fits that mold. Like, I wish I could do like a chart where I could show you, like, this is the big brother, this is the, heartthrob / crooner, this is the baby. Trust me, they all fit in the mold. And then you get to One Direction, and it's like they took the mold. You could see it. You can see that's what, like, when they were formed. So if you're older, and a lot of my people that watch this probably are, maybe you don't know a lot about One Direction. So let me tell you. One Direction was formed on the original UK version of the X Factor in 2010. And the way it came about was that these 5 guys had auditioned as solo artists, and they all got cut. Before they were kind of sent away, the judges started talking, and they wound up putting them together as a band. And it is Niall Horan, Liam Payne, Zayn Malik, Harry Styles, and Louis Tomlinson. They were good. Like, I've seen their auditions. Their auditions were decent, considering how young they were. But when they got together, I think from the first performance where you saw them sing together, they sang not not live, but they have a thing called Judges' Houses on the X Factor, and they sang "Torn" by Natalie Imbruglia, and I think the potential was there. I mean, as soon as you saw them sing together, you were like, "Oh crap!" Like, you knew that was something special. So, as good as they were in their own auditions, I think putting them together was the right move. And I think that the outline of the mold is there or was there. I think it was, I think when they put them together, when the judges put them together as a group, I think that mold is what they were going for. Because technically it's there, right? You have boys who each one seems like they would fit a certain role. But then the band actually starts happening, right? Like they come in third on X Factor, but they sign with Simon Cowell's record label. They start putting out albums. They start touring. They start doing, press and interviews, and they take that boy band mold and they just smash the crap out of it. Like, it's ridiculous to watch. It seems like, from the perspective of a boy band, that they're doing everything wrong. But somehow, in crushing that mold, they created something insane. Like, it works. It, and and even like the crazier part about it is, like, musically, maybe you don't always expect so much from boy bands. You're willing to let it slide if they don't sing their best or if their songs are a little hokey. And it's not like early on, with their first two albums, One Direction definitely had hokey songs. But starting with their third album, Midnight Memories, they actually started doing their own writing, like a lot of their own writing. Louis Tomlinson wrote like pretty much every song, wrote on like pretty much every song on that third album. And everything sort of changed from there. They started making just like really like smart, good music. And when you get to their final album as a band, Made in the AM, it's like, it's a really good record. And it's not like that's a really good record for a boy band. It's like that would be good no matter who put it out. There's no way in hell. I don't read a lot of like reviews and stuff, but I'm assuming there's no way in hell that album got the credit that it deserved when it came out, because I'm sure like the music snobs that review that kind of stuff weren't going to be like, oh, One Direction put out this awesome album. But when you look at them, I think they're going to stick around. Like, I think from this whole period of time, the last, 15 years post Backstreet Boys and NSYNC, I think they're it. I absolutely love them. And I came to them super late because they're not together right now. I'm hoping maybe some of their fans will see this, and I'm going to be very particular about the words that I use, because they're on a break. I think they are more New Kids on the Block than they are NSYNC. I don't see them being a band that fizzles out. I think they went on the break really young. They're still really young. I think Louis the oldest. I think he just turned 29. So it's not the end of the world that they're not together right now. I will say, so Zayn Malik left the band before the band went on a break. I just, I don't know that much about him. I'm assuming from what I've heard that he has like an anxiety disorder. And a lot of it was just way too much for him. And that's fair, right? I have an anxiety disorder. I don't think I could do a concert in front of like 60,000 people and be like bombarded all the time. Like, I don't think I could do it. So it's fair that it wasn't for him. And he just got to a point where he was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And honestly, the same thing happened with the New Kids on the Block. Jonathan Knight left before the band broke up for an extended period of time, and for the same reason, because he had a very severe anxiety disorder. And I think recently there's a British girl group called Little Mix, and they had one of their, and they're awesome for a girl, as a girl group, if you want to hear a girl group. But one of their members just left also for a similar reason. And from what I know, it's a lot of pressure. It's an awful lot. And like I said, I don't think I could do anything like that with like that level of intensity involved. So I don't know that like any sort of future reunion would include Zayn. But I will also say that I never thought a New Kids reunion would include Jonathan. Like, I never, when I dared to allow myself to dream of that, I didn't think he would do it. And when they first came back, he didn't even want to sing like one line in one song on stage. And now he's doing solos, and now he's got a show coming on HGTV where he fixes up like an old farmhouse. So he's kind of in the public eye in that way, which isn't something that he's ever wanted to do before. So maybe I'm wrong to doubt Zayn. Maybe I should give him the benefit of the doubt, right? But I have to be honest, like, I don't think you've heard the last of them. I think I have been following them a little bit. I don't know a lot about Zayn. I was saying how I came to them late. I did not discover them, because I'm always late to the party, until 2018. So they had been on a break for like two and a half years at that point, summer 2018. And it had been like 3 years since Zayn left the band. So I discovered them as 4. And then kind of worked my way backwards. But because of that, at that time, Harry Styles had a solo album out, his first solo album. And then Niall Horan was about to come out with his first album. So I started following the both of them as solo artists. And then when I started listening to One Direction, the first thing that like hit me was Louis Tomlinson. His voice kills me. Like, I don't know what it is. There's such a depth and a sincerity in it. And it gets so far under my skin. So he had been doing singles, and all along I was just like, why? I need him to put out like an entire record. Like I need a lengthy period of time of listening to him sing. And he finally did last year during the pandemic, and I'm obsessed with it and addicted to it. So I do follow them as solo artists as well. And I really feel like they're learning so much and they're growing so much as artists, as people. And I feel like if they took those individual sensibilities and brought them back to a band project, I really do think that like they still have something left to say. I think there was a promise when you listen to Made in the AM, what the four of them did on that album. I heard a rumor once that Harry said that it didn't work without Zayn, but as someone who came to them from an album that they made without Zayn, I don't know that I think that's true. I think what the four of them did together on that album was incredible. And I think they still have something left to say. So I'm actually like kind of hoping that I'll get to see that happen. I would go see One Direction in a heartbeat. Like, obviously, I've been to multiple New Kids concerts. I've seen the Backstreet Boys. I never got to see NSYNC. Seen Boys to Men with New Kids on the Block. They toured together. That was awesome. And also 98 Degrees. They were on that tour as well. So, yeah. So that's it. I have been rambling for a really long time. I'm really sorry. I'm very passionate about boy bands. I honestly had a bunch more stuff written down here, and I could have kept going. And maybe if anybody wants, I can at some point in the future do maybe like individual little 20-minute videos or something on each band as like a, maybe I could do it as like a playlist instead of all together in one really long video. But you can let me know. So don't forget the question, the pop quiz question is that NSYNC's first album sold 240 million copies in 1 week, and that stayed for 15 years until what artist, what album broke that record? If you have a favorite boy band, you should put it in the comments below. And I will see you next week, next Tuesday, with a brand new video. And I hope you're all doing great, and I love you. Bye.